Welcome to the Interior Analysis Podcast. It's your boy leading this one. I'm Jelani Kelly.
I'm Evan Westman.
And we got a special guest, Nick Vonk, here today. Welcome to the show, my guy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, also, quick side note, David, he's not here live. I picked this episode. It's probably out of the list, out of the movies I've chosen, it's probably the strangest one I've picked.
Definitely the most unexpected, I would say.
Yeah, because you guys know I'm more about supernatural, anything supernatural. Like, it doesn't have to be superhero, but it tends to be most of the time. For example, the last episode we did was The Suicide Squad. All right, so let me start with my intro to this movie. There's a poster in, like, the editing room at Drexel, right? I think. Evan?
Maybe there used to be, last I checked, which was quite recently, I think they maybe took it down.
Okay. Maybe somebody coughed on it.
Maybe, I don't know.
I remember that, and I think Silver Linings Playbook specifically. For some reason, I just decided one day to look up compilations of J.K. Simmons insults from this movie. So,
you could make several of those, I'd say.
Oh, for sure. And there's even more in Invincible. Before I ever watched this movie, like, I was watching these. And then, oddly enough, watching those compilations just made me want to watch the movie because I had no idea why this man was so angry. And I'm glad you don't actually find out, but, like, I just found it so hilarious how creative he was with the insults. And I hope to achieve that level of creativity one day when it comes to roasting. Yeah, that's kind of a bit of history why I chose this pick for today. Any other intro stuff?
Yeah, well, Nick, we had you on for this because this is one of your favorites. So what has your relationship with it been?
This movie sort of redefined for me my take on criticism. And I think I watched it for the first time roundabout when I was trying to figure out whether or not I wanted to do computer science or be a screenwriting major. So I was in that line between, like, oh, do I do, the safer STEM thing, or do I, like, try to go into this world of pushing yourself, being pushed, trying to figure out, like, how to be good at art. I think this movie came in at just the right time for that. And it bounces on that line of what does good job mean, and what does criticism mean, and how do you drive yourself, who drives you, stuff like that, and sort of seeing people be the best that they can possibly be and pushing themselves to be the best that they can possibly be, being pushed in that way, I think was super inspiring at that time, and that just drove me further into the artistic world.
Nice. So instead of drum beats, you wanted to hear keyboard clacks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I picked up. So I'm from New York City originally, and in the basement sometimes people leave old stuff. Someone once left an old German typewriter down there.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
I would definitely write on that if I found
it's
one.
wild.
It's so satisfying.
It's so like, it's umlauts and everything. Like, it's this old, super whacked out typewriter, and I ended up getting it refurbished. It was freshman year, so I'm like, oh, this is gonna be part of my process. Like, I'm gonna be a fucking typewriter writer person. And then it's really loud, and I have roommates, and I tend to write late at night, so it just didn't work out. But now I have this, like, old German typewriter.
Yeah. If it weren't so impractical, I would write on typewriters all the time.
That was so
they
much
are
fun.
So cool to use.
Yeah.
I don't have much of a relationship with this movie. I'll give, like, a little bit of what I knew about it because I had seen it before. I remembered hearing about it because, like, right when I started doing, like, reviews on IMDb was, like, summer of 2014, which is, like, this was, like, the new big thing right then. It had, like, just started gaining prominence and was, like, kind of the hot thing at that exact moment. So I like, heard about it through then, and I was like, why haven't I heard about this? Like, I hadn't seen ads for it or anything because it's, like, real independent. And then I watched it, like, 3 years later, and I gotta say I was a little underwhelmed back then. I think I didn't quite appreciate it. And I would say even now, I think I appreciate it a lot less than most people. Like, this has a ton of acclaim, and I see it. I just don't quite I think I'm not quite as into it as everyone else, but I don't think it's bad by any stretch. That's pretty much all of it. And then I rewatched it this past week.
So let's jump into the first topic we have. Sacrificing for art/greatness. Evan, would you like to kick this topic off?
Yeah, I felt like this, out of everything, is pretty much the central theme of the movie. I think you could probably say it a few different ways, but I remember one of my first reactions watching this was like, if you ever see those graphs that people will use, they'll do like what we think success looks like, and it's like a straight line up, and then they put it next to what success actually looks like, and it's like this crazy, messy line that ends up in the same place. I've always felt like Whiplash is that second graph, whereas like a lot of other movies, like about successful people, like sports movies or music movies or biopics about like artists, that kind of thing, they kind of give more so the like first graph look, where it's like I don't know, there's just like some success stories where when they turn it into a movie or any kind of like sort of fictionalized version, it's just like, look at all of this success, because there's not necessarily like, when somebody rises to become like a huge star in terms of like the trajectory of their career, a lot of times it's not like conflict along the way. It's just like, oh my god, we're blowing up, now we're blowing up more, now we're blowing up even more. So like I think that is kind of the narrative that tends to come up a lot, versus like, and granted this is a fictional story, but this is all about just like the sacrifice and how intensely the training has to be, theoretically, when we can get into that with this theme, but like how much Andrew sacrifices to be one of the greats like he wants to. I'll start with this, and I want to hear your guys' takes on it too. Personally, I am not into the idea of like trying to be the greatest at something at the expense of everything else. I think it's good to work hard, but if you get anywhere near the point where your hands are like bleeding uncontrollably over your drum set, and granted this is like super dramatic, but you know, like that kind of thing, that's like,
or where you kill yourself.
Yeah, or where you kill yourself for your art, which like happens in real life. So or not for your art, but whatever. Like the example they give with Sean Casey, like that kind of thing can happen. So if you get anywhere like remotely near that point, especially for something that's a passion, I'm like super not into that. We can do without that masterpiece, and you can have like your sanity, please.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. And I like added to that, I just think it's sad when like people turn something that they love into something that they hate because they like go too hard with it. I think that's just kind of a sad thing when that happens. So I want to hear your guys' take on it too, though.
It's so complicated because I heard somewhere sort of someone described that split as between Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. Tiger Woods was like, in golf competitions at age 3 and winning, competitions all the way up from, stuff like that. Just like madness, just pure, like groomed to be the best from the get-go. No other, like one goal in mind. And then I heard, I don't know exactly, but Roger Federer was like, he tried soccer and he tried, hockey. He tried a few other things and none of them really worked out. And then by 13, he was like, maybe I'll try tennis. And then he was like, I kind of like this. And he found the right person to train him and, and then ended up becoming like one of the best in the world and just sort of like brought himself there. So, and then other examples too, right? Like Harper Lee, who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird when she was like, 35, 40, something like that. Stuff like that, where it's a weird combination of hard work and circumstance, luck, skill, and natural talent.
Right.
Where, you can cultivate things, but at what point is it just like you're not cut out for it? In Sean Casey's example, that's what Fletcher said. He was like, all these professors were telling me he's not cut out for it. Then he became first chair, at Lincoln Center, and then he killed himself. So it was like, where does that drive fit into the process of being the best? Van Gogh,
right, slices his ear off and makes what's the thing, Starry Night.
Yeah,
Like,
well, you know, he was at Giverney. You know, he was I don't know if that's how you pronounce
The
that,
mental institution.
yeah, and he painted most of his art within like a 5-year period. He was, you know, he was not an artist for most of his life. He just like did it all real fast because he worked really hard and ended up being really good, but he was not recognized for it in his time. He was kind of like, he did get some recognition. He got some, like, he was sort of on the cusp of being really famous, but then ended up not quite getting there. So, you know, it's complicated. But that's final thing, like, that's the prime, I think, split in the movie. There are these two competing philosophies. That's also part of why I love this movie, is because it pits two life philosophies head to head. I mean, from start to finish, it's like he's pushing himself, he's drumming late at night, like this is the opening shot, and then, you know, it immediately pits that against, oh, he wants a girlfriend. You know, and it's like, do you live your life? Do you find love? Do you, you know, fill out the rest of your life? Or do you stay up late? Do you practice? Do you say, I can't have a girlfriend because you're going to distract me from my art?
Yeah, and say that specifically to her face.
Like, to her face, yeah, exactly.
Drumming is more important than you, so get out of here.
And the thing that I think I landed on was that, like, they're both valid. You know, they're both valid ways of living life. I don't think there's one answer. If you're a Tiger Woods type, be a Tiger Woods type. If you're a Roger Federer type, do that.
I can't help but think of Michael Jordan as well. I watched the Last Dance documentary, and I'm trying to think of, like, his sacrifice. I of course he put a lot of time in the gym. So did, like, Kobe Bryant. I remember hearing about him taking, I think, 300 shots before leaving the gym or something like that when he practiced. And if he missed, he would have to take 100 more or something ridiculous.
Ooh.
Some anime ridiculous.
Wait. 100 more for every miss?
I don't remember the specifics. I
Okay.
feel like I'm exaggerating, but I don't want to undercut.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, like, yeah, they sacrificed time. They just put in hard work, but there was, like, maybe Michael Jordan sacrificed his personality because a lot of his teammates thought he was an asshole. So, like, I'm thinking that was, like, the biggest thing. But, like, there was drive there. He clearly put in a lot of work, but there wasn't, like, well, actually, there was some physical sacrifice. He was bleeding after wearing the Jordan 1s for one game. I don't know. I just thought that's another comparison, like with the Tiger Woods, the Roger Federer thing. I think some things can be sacrificed, some things should be sacrificed, but I don't think everything needs to be sacrificed for greatness, especially the ultimate thing, your own life. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me personally. And also, like, my question is, who's to say you're guaranteed that greatness anyway? Like, there are tons of people in the world that, like, put in over the 10,000 hours that Outliers talked about, and it's like they'll never get anywhere. Like, it sucks, but that's just how life be. It be like that. Like, you can't talk to anybody like, hey, here are my 30,000 hours I put in. Where's my greatness? Like, you can't do that.
Yeah, it's a massive gamble.
Right, exactly.
Just to build off of a couple things you said, like, I kind of thought about it more in terms, or not that I've thought about it like this, but I feel like growing up I saw it more in terms of sports. Because like I did a couple of club things, and, like, I mean, similar to probably 100 million other little boys in America, I wanted to play baseball as a kid, like in the MLB. And then I think at a certain point, I have a distinct memory of, like, when I realized that wasn't probably going to happen. I tried out for some stuff. I think I, like, didn't make some club team or something. And, like, I wasn't super invested in that. But I kind of, like, I think I went and I did the math. And I was like, okay, how many people could at one time be in the MLB? And I think the most, like, generous number that I got was, like, a little over 8,000. And I was like, I think if I can't make this team, I'm probably not one of those 8,000. So at that point, I kind of was like, all right, I think this isn't going to happen. And, you know, it wasn't, like, this huge revelation for me or anything. Like, it wasn't life-changing, or it didn't feel that way anyway. But I think from the other kids that I played baseball and other sports with growing up, I think some people get way into it before they realize they don't have it. and that can be, I think it's a really dangerous thing. Just seeing like how much time, like I know kids who like, I played like street hockey with a couple of kids, just like screwing around in the neighborhood this is when they were like probably 10. And now, like, since then, I haven't seen them in years, but I've heard they've like put their whole life into that now. And apparently they're doing great with it. But also, like, I know they skipped like tons of school and stuff like that. And this is just like one of a few examples that I've heard of. Like some people, either the kids want to or the parents want them to, they just put their entire life into one sport. And like, right. I always think like, I'm for you like going for that, but also you gotta be really, really good. And if you don't have a plan B, like, what do? I wasn't thinking I would make this comparison, but I thought of it while one of you was talking. Have either of you seen Monsters U, the sequel to Monsters Inc.?
No, I don't think I have.
No.
Okay, because I won't spoil it, but it deals with like this concept in a really interesting way, especially for a kids movie. I won't spoil it, but it's on Disney Plus. I highly recommend it.
You know, another problem with this though is that the stories that we consume, right? Like, no one wants to watch a movie about a normal person doing normal people things. We center ourselves around these stories of these weird people doing crazy things. You know what I mean? We want to see the best of the best. We have these, you know, in the sports analogy, like the Olympics.
Yeah, I was thinking of that watching the Olympics.
Yeah,
recently.
like this whole thing centered on people being the best of the best. Like, this is what humanity can do. It's crazy. It's so much fun, and you know, at least for me, it like builds up this huge emotional like knot in my chest where I'm like, oh, like I want to be the best. Like, I need to be the best. But if you put that in the grand scheme of like, you know, take like the history of meanings of life in terms of like philosophy, right? You go in the sense of like stoicism, you go in the sense of mindfulness, Buddhism, Tao, stuff like that. Like, this is one tiny little niche, and it has to be tiny because there can only be one best, you know?
Right. Out of like the 13 billion people that have ever lived.
Yeah, but like, holy shit, is it interesting?
Yeah.
And holy shit, is it wildly fun to see happen, because, you know, there's a story of how Buddha became Buddha just sitting on a hill eating, you know, rice or porridge or whatever. Like, no, you know, who's gonna put that on TV?
Right.
You know, he's interesting for a different reason, but it's like, it's tough because to compare it to something else, taken in a different direction, you know, thinking of your parents as superheroes, right? Like, you know, growing up, I feel like for a majority of people, it's like they like see their parents and are like, oh, this person is infallible. Like, this is just like what a human being should be. Like, this is what I know. This is what I'm growing up with. And then slowly you learn, oh, no, my parents are people. They have flaws. They have issues. Some of those issues have been passed down to me. I need to work on those now, you know. And bringing it back to the movie, it's like you see these characters who are like perfectly amazing at what they do. And they're aiming for that perfection. And they're like almost losing their humanity because of it.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? You know?
Right.
Yeah, and I think the movie asks that question in a really effective way where like, I don't know that it's presenting you with like, it's not giving you a really strong takeaway, especially because of the ending, because Andrew is ultimately successful. And I'll get into some of my thoughts on that a little bit more in a different topic, but like, I don't think Damien Chazelle has one single, like, if we're talking about this as a theme, I don't think he answers the thematic question. He, like, that's not to say that he doesn't do the work there, because he gives a ton of reasons for like, okay, if you think sacrificing for art is everything, then all of the blood that Andrew sheds literally throughout the whole thing, like, that's all worth it. Or you could say like, I think he should have tapped out here, or I think he should have tapped out here, or I don't think at any point he's kind of saying like, that decision is good, that one isn't, or like, this is too far, or this isn't. But he's showing you like the entire spectrum of like, how far can you take this? And like giving you markers for like where do you think the line should go.
Yeah. I also think it's fascinating that there's no denouement.
Right. Yeah, it ends right when
You know what I mean?
like has become the greatest, and then it ends right there.
I mean, think about the rest of that scene, right? So they're a band opening for, a concert, right?
Mm-hmm.
They probably have like a few songs. They did one song, Andrew got embarrassed. He left, came back, did his whole, they did Caravan. He, finished with that big, drum solo. They probably got like few more songs to do. Like, what do you do after that? Like, what? I mean, yeah, we get the hard, cut to black, but or written and directed by Damien Chazelle, but what do they get in that scenario?
Mm-hmm.
Where does Angie go from there? There's I can't even fathom what his life would look like after that. Is that because he didn't get the girl, he didn't get fame theoretically, unless
well, we kind of don't know whether he gets fame.
We don't know exactly, so it leaves it on that note of that split is still that split. It's not like Damien Chazelle is like, this is the right answer to this question. It's like, this is just what happened, and then it's satisfying but not.
I think it's the right ending in either case. I wouldn't call it a dissatisfying ending. It's just kind of a question of I think that's an individual viewer thing, whether it's satisfying or not.
Yeah,
No, it's satisfying to me. I think Black Swan achieves that as well, but more of in a WTF kind of way.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna say, I was just gonna bring up the book of Job in the Bible, because that's one that fascinates me. I keep thinking about it. I'm personally not religious, but I took a class recently on the Bible as literature and taking the story of Job as a story and seeing what it says and what it means philosophically. Is it a satisfying story type of thing? So there's this guy he's great. He worships God. He's all good in God's eyes, and the devil goes to God, and the devil's like, what if we, hey, I bet we can mess with this guy. And God's like, all right, sure, go ahead, see what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not super fucked up. So, the devil kills his firstborn and, is fucking around with him, and he's just being
eventually
an asshole.
they take literally everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're fucking this guy over. And Job
it's
is
as a bet, isn't it?
Yeah, because the devil's like, yeah, I bet we could I bet we could mess with this guy, and God's like, nah, that's my boy right there. There's no way.
Why would God allow Sorry.
So exactly, that's the philosophical question. Is Job is like, yo, what the fuck, man? I'm a good dude. I've been worshiping you. I've been doing everything you told me to do. Why is this happening to me? So largely philosophical context, it's why do bad things happen to good people? You know what I mean? So there's the punishment system that's codified in the Bible of you get punished for sins and you get rewarded for worship. And so it asks this question of why is this system imperfect? Why is there an imperfect system of I'm worshiping, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do for this ultimate judgment that will end up determining whether I go to heaven or hell? Can I really trust this?
The Good Place as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so Job is Job goes to first Job goes to his friends. He's like, yo, what the fuck is going on? What's happening? And then his friends are like, oh man, fuck that, fuck God, get out of there, start worshiping someone else.
Right, because the whole thing's a test of the bet is if all this happens, he will stop worshiping God, right?
Yeah,
I think that's the tenets of the bet.
Yeah, so Job goes to God directly, and he's like, what the fuck, man? This is super not chill. This is super not okay. I'm not happy with what's going on. And God essentially says to him, listen, there are things that you cannot understand as a human. There's so much complexity in the world. You're committing sins that you can't even fathom, and you're being punished for those. And Job is like, yeah, right? So Job is like, what? All right, fine. And he accepts it. He's like, okay, I'll accept this answer. And God is like, yo, but your friends are not getting out of there so fast. He fucks over Job's friends, right? But what I find fascinating is that essentially the answer to why do bad things happen to good people is just because. And it's that is so not satisfying, right? You open up this door with this big question, right? Like in Whiplash, you open up this door with this huge question of what's the right answer? And the right answer is there's no denouement. There is none. I can't give you a right answer. But in its own right, it is kind of satisfying if you take in, so with the Book of Job specifically, you take in the idea of like mindfulness and, you know, the whole like being one with the universe type of deal. Things happen because they happen. Like, things are the way they are. Being present and mindful is like a way to sort of deal with that issue. So with Job is like, all right, like, things happen. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. Like, it's the way things happen. It can't be explained. So back to Whiplash, you know, it's like, I don't even know if Andrew knows what the right answer is at the end.
I think he knows what he wants, though. Like, he wants to be one of the greats, and anything that prevents him from that, at least for most of it. I think at the end of the second act, when he gets kicked out, there starts to be like a little bit. He starts to back off from that, but then by the end, I would say he falls back into it when he goes back out on stage and like risks or I don't know if he risks everything there, but he's like, I think at the end he believes that sacrificing for art is worth it. Yeah, I think I would be open to debate on that, because I think you could see evidence for both sides, but that's how I read it.
Yeah, well, I think he goes back to somewhere in the middle, you know, because like he does call Nicole again. He's like, hey, like, I realized I fucked up. I'm sorry. Like, I was being an asshole. Like, you know.
I don't feel like he takes it that far though in that conversation. Like, does he apologize?
He does.
He apologizes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
He says, I'm sorry. Like, I know, and like, I know this sorry is not good enough, but like, you know, I realized my mistake.
And then she hit him with the boyfriend.
Dude, that was brutal. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But like, he's somewhere in the middle again at the end, you know. Yeah, it's so rough.
I wonder if he would have gotten back together with her, and then Fletcher invited him. Like, I wonder if he would have broken up for the second time.
Yeah, you know, because like, is he back on this path to greatness? You know. Well, I also think it's funny that Fletcher says. I think he says it like at least twice. He says, well, the first one is when they're like, he picks out the out of tune player, and he's like, if you deliberately sabotage this band, I will fuck you like a pig. You know, it's just wild. And then at the end, he deliberately sabotaged his own band.
Yeah.
By bringing on this drummer who has no idea what's happening.
Right. And I think if Andrew isn't successful in that moment, then Fletcher is gonna...
He just shit all over himself.
Yeah, he's gonna bring down the hammer there. And, like, does to the extent that he can within that specific scene. But I think afterward, like, Andrew is, like, has no career ever after that. If he isn't successful. Scene, and becomes like Fletcher's Charlie Parker, like he does.
Well, same with Fletcher though too. Like Fletcher kind of shit the bed on that one as well, because like he's like, you know, decided to shit his own pants because he's like, well, it's over. I'm not a shaver anymore. Like, I got humiliated. Like, it's over. So I'm gonna bring.
Right. He doesn't have a whole lot left to lose there.
Yeah. So he's like, fuck it. You know, I tried and now I'm done trying. So I'm gonna sabotage my own band just to bring this kid down.
Hey guys, swear warning for this one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I can put it at the beginning. If you've seen this movie.
Yeah, like.
No, I'm gonna be quoting some things.
Yeah, this is the only time in any movie or real life I've ever heard anyone use the term father fucking.
Oh yeah.
I've never heard anyone say that in any other context, real or
father fucking time.
Give me those pictures of Spider-Man. Beat you to it, Jelani.
What?
I beat you to the J. Jonah Jameson.
Oh, god damn it. Well, there's an Invincible. Have you seen Invincible, Nick?
No.
Damn it.
Was that the Angelina Jolie one?
That is a TV
Unbreakable?
show. It's a
No.
TV show. No.
It's a newish animated show.
Oh, no,
I haven't either, but I know of it.
Yeah, I won't get the reference thing.
There's also the movie about Vince Papale, the Eagles guy from the 70s that's also called that, but whatever.
No. No. This one has J.K. Simmons.
I had a neighbor who was in it, so that's the only reason I really know about it.
You see hints of Fletcher after like a few conversations with him. Hints of Fletcher within Andrew on his first date with Nicole, and it's blatantly evident when the camera zooms in on him when he starts like questioning her about Fordham. And they're just going back and forth and like, dog, back off. It's kind of uncomfortable. That being said, like, out of all of his outbursts into being a prick, I didn't mind the dinner table scene at all. I didn't like that his father turned on him in that moment, because it kind of seemed out of character from what I had seen from the father up until that point. And then past that point as well, his father was supportive throughout the entire movie. So I'm like, where did that line come from? Like, was it just to push him into drumming further? And
what line
making his
specifically
hands
are you talking about from his dad? Because I'm not disagreeing. I just want to know exactly what you're pointing.
You heard from the Lincoln Center?
Yeah.
Oh.
I remember that part because, like, yeah, that was brutal. I remember, so I rewatched this recently, you know, to prep, and I hadn't seen it for a couple years, but I do remember that dinner scene very distinctly because that was so brutal. I mean, you know, we get introduced to, 4 extra characters that are only there for that one scene.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, his cousins and aunt.
Yeah. But yeah, like that part was brutal, but I think that actually gets that characterization gets explained later on. So when Andrew is sitting down with his dad and the counselor at the school, his dad says, "I wouldn't let anyone do that to you." Like, I think his dad is his own, is the most realistic character in there, right? So, like, the first time we see his dad, someone knocks him on the back of the head with some popcorn, and he says sorry. He gets trampled on, I mean, from the get-go, right? And then, you know, he sees Andrew, like, his hand's bleeding, and he's like, don't do, like, stay safe, you know? Like, just don't like, ruin yourself for this. But then he steps up, and he actually sort of says this thing that seems out of character, where he's like, oh yeah, well, what about, you know, what about Lincoln Center? And it's like, he's the one that holds the power to, like, bite into Andrew. No one else at that table could have said anything that would get under Andrew's skin. It's his father, because I think there's also an element of, like, Andrew doesn't want to be his dad.
Yeah.
Right. No, yeah, that's true for both this. I'm going to be comparing Black Swan a lot because I'm hot off that movie.
Yeah.
But that as well.
Yeah, and like, but his dad also ends up becoming a strong character by the end. He's like, I wouldn't let anyone do that to you. And he's also, like, protective of his son at the, you know, in the very last scene. He's like, let's go home. Like, you know, I'm going to take care of you. It'll be okay. And then Andrew becomes, you know, he finds his own strength and is like, nah, it's time to do this thing.
I think it's interesting with his dad as well that, like, I'd forgotten about that line that he kind of, like, is digging into him at the dinner scene. But I think it's interesting with his dad that Fletcher uses Andrew's dad as, like, a point of insulting him. Like, as soon as he finds out that information, like, oh yeah, he hasn't really done that much writing. He's like, all right, ammo, boom. You're gonna turn out like your dad if you don't.
When he's questioning him in the hall, I've seen the insults, so I already knew about it. But, like, when he's questioning him in the hallway, like, just his stance, he puts his left hand on the wall, like, next to his head. It's really uncomfortable, and it's like, it feels more like an interrogation than him just talking to you.
But he's also, like, that's almost his most chill scene. Like, that's Fletcher at, like, maybe his friendliest in that scene.
It was with the little girl.
It happens.
All right, that's probably the most. But then I think with Andrew, that's his.
With Andrew,
well, it happens. Yeah. It happens 3 times. Where there's at least 3 times, I think. There's that one at the beginning, right, when he's like, oh, well, what do your parents do? You know, he's being super sweet, and he's like, yeah, you know, you think
it's just get to know you.
You can be Bird, yeah, and then he switches. I mean, on a dime, and just destroys him. And then there's that scene with a little girl who is like. He's like, oh my god, he's talking to the dad, he's like, he's like, yeah, you know, she's so grown up, and like he's like, give me a high five, and then
come
he comes
play for me someday.
Yeah,
no.
Exactly. And then he comes back in and he, like, shits on everyone. He's like, I can still fucking see you, mini me, you know, stuff like that. And there was what was the third one? It was when he was talking about Sean Casey. He's crying. He's like, this is so rough, you know, like,
man's an associate.
Anyways, exactly. He's like, anyways, like, let's get to practicing. And he goes, not quite my tempo. And that's the scene where the 3 of them are on the stool just
for like hours
from 9 p.m. to like 2 a.m.
Yeah,
and so he switches on a dime, and I think he does that to keep Andrew hooked. Like, you know, you see Andrew smile at him 3 times where he's like, Andrew's like, oh, he's a good guy, and then just destroys him. But he's like, but like, it's a combination of, he still has the capacity to be a good guy, and also this is what I really want.
Yeah,
and he so just abusive. Stays on the hook. Yeah,
so abusive.
I like that you see a hint of it in the very beginning, like their first interaction where he's like, "Did I ask you to start playing again?"
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That I think is brilliant. I mean, the opening scene
Yeah.
where you see the protagonist antagonist split, the philosophy split gets shown in the first 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Plus, he's in the dark,
Yep.
and he's a dark guy.
Yeah.
There's layers to this, guys.
yeah, he just shows up
Open
places.
eyes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Teleports.
Oh no, that's the next topic. Fletcher's a supervillain. But continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think just building off of what we can transition this into Fletcher, building off of what you guys were saying, like I think his teaching techniques, I feel like he's very aware of how other teachers operate, and we don't really like see it super specifically, but I feel like most of what he does in this movie in terms of how he teaches is kind of a response to other teaching methods where he's like, everyone else told you like that you are special. I'm here to tell you, no, you're not. And also like, I think when he's and in that first scene with Andrew, he's like, did I tell you to stop playing? Like I think he understands. I think he knows why Andrew did it. He knows that from most people, when like an authority figure says something like that, it means you shouldn't have stopped. Yeah. And he's just, I don't know if he's doing it because he didn't actually want Andrew to start playing again, or if he's just doing it to be like, look at how I'm like not every other teacher. You don't know where I'm going to go next.
I think a little bit of both.
I kind of like the fact that you don't know. You can't be for sure.
Yeah, it's real. What does he say? He's like, and your version of a response is to like start playing again like a wind-up.
Oh
monkey.
yeah.
Well, there's a couple moments where I can't quite understand what his motivation is for doing it. Like I think it's tied in with the one we were talking about where he's like getting to know Andrew, because it's right after he dismisses the guy who was out of tune but not actually out of tune, and he kind of goes to Andrew and is like, hey, I know I cracked down on him, but I'm not usually like that. And he's kind of like trying to warm up to him. And then in the next scene is when he throws
oh
the
my
chair.
god, when he slowly descends into the ball of fury that is J.K. Simmons, bro. Like I don't know. I think that was just brilliant. The escalation when he's like, nope, not quite my tempo.
Yeah.
Let's try again. Just relax.
Fucking rushing over you.
In 4, damn it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
But like that moment specifically where like I think you guys have just kind of made it clear for me why. But before I was looking at that moment where he's being nice to Andrew and he's like, hey, this isn't how I am. I was like, does he actually believe that? Like, why is he doing this? And now that we're talking about it, I think you guys have made it clear, like, he's doing it deliberately just to mess with him. Not to, like, get a certain specific reaction. It's just to get in his head and start, like, it's an early step of gaslighting him, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he does a lot specifically for Andrew, because I think he picked up that it was like, oh, this is my bird, like, from the get-go.
Do you think so? Because that was a question that I had, was like, do we think Andrew is just one of a lot of people that he's trying to build into his
I think so.
his genius?
Joanna,
do you think he's one of many, or you think Fletcher is picking him out specifically?
I was going to say a bit of both, because his methods were unsuccessful, but I think he just tries again with Andrew. But now that I think about it, I think it was more nobody, like, he couldn't find a prodigy under his methods thing because of the way the band reacted. So I think he was already doing that before Andrew showed up. And I think he was testing it with the band or any band he was conducting, because of their reactions. Like, in fact, that they were joking around and messing around with their instruments, and then as soon as he walked into the room, like, the room got quiet and everybody straightened up. It was crazy.
Yeah,
Snape is in the building.
I also think, like, part of it is just the economy of the movie. You know what I mean? Like, if he was doing the same thing for someone else, like, did Damien Chazelle really have time to, like, show the audience that?
Yeah.
You know?
I like it as a question. I just have wondered, like, is Andrew's, like, situation basically happening in a different way with, like, all the trombones players too? Like, is he doing it to everyone and Andrew's just the one that survived? Or did he see Andrew and was like, this is my kid, maybe one of like 3, or like, is it the entire band? I don't know for sure. I think you could make an argument either way.
I think he zooms in on Andrew.
Yeah.
At a certain point, yes, but I wonder, like, how soon does he realize? Because I think what he does say specifically, and maybe this is a lie, but I think it's true, is when he says, like, Connolly was just there as motivation for you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he brought Connolly into the band because he believed in him. I do think that was deliberate to push Andrew.
Yeah.
But that's probably not true of everyone in that band. So who is there as leverage for somebody else, and who is there that he is like, I'm gonna make you the next great saxophone player or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I thought that was interesting that when Andrew went to see his Fletcher's performance, Fletcher was playing the piano. So I was like, oh my god, the way he must crack down on the pianist in the band must be insane. If he's like playing jazz piano, that's the instrument he chose. I mean, yeah, I feel like at least from my point of view, it would just be conjecture from that point. But like evidence-wise, I think Andrew is the only person for whom he brought like another person into the band just to fuck with him. You know what I mean? Like he didn't bring another piano player in just to fuck with the piano player. But
but again, like you said, Damien Chazelle maybe just didn't bother with that.
Because like that would have been extraneous.
Yeah. Because like, yeah, you're right. It doesn't matter to this story, but it does make you wonder, like I think there is a version of this where you do that, where you see like there is another version of Connolly in that band who becomes a little bit of a character. I think it's fine that he did it like this. Maybe it's better. I think we'd have to see the other version to really know. But I wouldn't be surprised if he messed around with that in another draft.
What happened to the folder? You think Dude took it? You think Fletcher took it? I think Fletcher took it.
Well, Fletcher could teleport.
Well, okay. Well, that confirms it then.
Yeah, I have actually, that's something that the FAQ page on IMDb asked that, and basically the answer that's there, which I think that's like a user given answer, so it may not be like canon, but it says basically we never know what happened to the folder.
Oh.
And like truly, I think there's no way of knowing, because I think it's pretty clear that Andrew didn't do anything with it.
Maybe they should have put it at the end in the after credit scene for Whiplash 2.
Fletcher doing like some sort of vampire
To
hyper
whip,
speed,
to
like
lash.
I mean that part was sort of it's hard to know where to take that. If you want to bring Black Swan back in, though, the descent into madness.
Yeah.
Like he has that moment where he loses the folder, and then later he has that moment where he like walks it, like literally runs away from a car crash.
Yeah.
With a concussion,
Or worse, maybe.
Or
we
worse,
never really figure out what happened, like what all the diagnoses from that were.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're because right off the bat we see Fletcher's point of view, and then we sort of take Andrew's point of view a couple times from there. So it's like maybe from Andrew's point of view he genuinely did just put the folder down, but maybe it's also like he put the folder down in a different place and someone else scooped it up, or
He said not to put it down. Like,
yeah,
why would you? Why do you need to put a folder down to like get something from the vending machine anyway?
Yeah, like what else do you have armpits for? Like
Facts. Yeah, or knees.
Yeah, exactly.
People have very inventive ways of getting their hands free.
There's ways. Let's transition into Fletcher as the Dark Mentor, and I added supervillain because that's what he is. We've already talked about him a bit, but for me, I'm gonna start off. Fletcher has the Homelander effect for me. I made Evan watch The Boys.
Both seasons.
I don't know if you've seen The Boys yet on Amazon.
I've seen pieces of it, yeah.
Okay. So do you know who Homelander is?
Yeah.
The Superman guy? Yeah. So he has that effect on me where I'm drawn every second he's on screen because I have no idea what he's going to do. The unpredictability is what I'm drawn to because as a screenwriter / writer in general, I can normally identify a structure / guest dialogue, you name it. I can normally predict what's going to happen when it comes to a standard movie, but when you add a character like Fletcher into a basic structured movie or a TV series like Homelander, I really don't know what they're going to do, because I don't know how well they're going to stick to the tropes of whatever genre this is. So, for example, Homelander, you don't kill the good guys in any superhero genre, but Homelander, he is technically one of the good guys. So what is he really gonna do?
Yeah.
Fletcher, same effect, kind of. Well, not really, because I don't really watch. This counts as a drama, right?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't really watch drama movies like that, but like, I think it was the unpredictability of what he was going to say, mainly. Sometimes it was what he was going to do, because I had a conversation with my brother right after I watched it, and he was like, it was the unpredictability of how far he was going to physically abuse Andrew after the slaps, and he said the slaps never, like, anything after that never came. Yeah, he threw a chair at him, but it didn't hit him. So I guess that's okay. But I don't know. I just love... I think Miranda, like, comparing it to... And we'll get into comparisons with other movies as well, but I think Miranda Priestley kind of had the same effect on me as well. It's just not to this extreme, because she was much more mild-mannered. It was just she had a sharp tongue. I don't know. J.K. Simmons, he won the Oscar for... Was it supporting or main?
Supporting, I think.
Supporting? Yeah. This is... Goddamn. And one of my favorite lines from this movie is just, "Are you one of those single-tier people? Do I look like a double fucking rainbow to you?" I don't know. Oh, man.
Yeah.
So, before we get too far away from the supervillain thing, this is what I wanted to ask you, Jelani, because I think a couple times on the show, including last episode, you talked about the thing that you like for villains to do, where, like, you want to sometimes actually see their whole plan enacted. And I kind of feel like you are calling him a supervillain, so maybe we can say this. I think Fletcher kind of fits that bill, because we see, if we want to call it his evil plan, it gets fulfilled by the end of this movie.
Genius.
He has created a Charlie
right.
Parker. So I want to, do you have anything, like, to say on that? Because I feel like he kind of is your kind of villain in that way too.
Nope. That's just adding to that's another argument on top of the unpredictability thing. Like, his plan just comes to fruition. You don't see it often. I love it. And there's no, like, backtracking with it. Like, normally in any supernatural anything, like, maybe the villain's plan will happen, and it's like, oh no, he did it. He did the thing that he said he was gonna do, and then it's like, nope, Eagles or some Deus Ex Machina. Let's rewind time or something.
The MacGuffin
Wonder
is
Woman
what
84.
Thought it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fair. Like, he does. He says, like, this is what I'm gonna do. He's like, hey, you ever heard about Charlie Parker? And then he does it.
Yeah.
But also, it kind of reminds me of the Joker in Christopher Nolan's world of being like,
you
but
shouldn't have mentioned Nolan in front of Evan.
Nah, Nick already knows how. He knows the danger he's getting into there.
but like when the Joker's like, he's like, what are you talking? Like, I need you. I need you. Because like, it's so much fun. Like, I need you to be my counterpart, and that's sort of what Fletcher says. He's like, I was looking for my Charlie Parker, like, I was looking for this person that I could abuse and enact my plan on, and you happen to be the right pupil, so like they do work in a superhero supervillain type of way of like, they need one another, and they have this relationship of like, so and that's sort of another thing that I wanted to get into. Obviously we can come back to Nolan, but
we don't have to.
Please don't.
But like, who's the motivator behind Andrew? Because, right, like, Andrew's the one sitting in the basement in the beginning. Andrew's the one pushing himself to bleed without Fletcher telling him to. Andrew's the one, like, pushing himself. Does Andrew want Fletcher there? Like, does Andrew need his supervillain? You know what I mean? He's like, in order to continue doing what he's doing and to push himself further, he needs someone to push him. So this person who's extremely toxic, this person who's horrible for him, tells him that he's gonna be horrible for him. He's like, I'm gonna throw something at your head, and then he does. And Andrew it almost makes me think that Andrew wants to be Sean Casey,
right? Even though he doesn't quite know. I don't think he knows who Sean Casey is until he finds out he dies. I don't think he's brought up before then.
Yeah,
but
I thought we were about to get that ending. It was when he was walking away from the stage. I was like, oh no,
it's over. Yeah,
no,
Brooks was here.
Keep an eye on your son, bro.
Yeah.
No.
I think with Fletcher's, like, does Andrew need Fletcher? There's a scene in the script that got cut where Andrew is going to drop out of Schaefer, like, really early, like maybe first 20 minutes, or even like 10. And Fletcher calls him into his office, even though, like, he's not in studio band yet. And he's like, I like to talk to people who are going to drop out. Like, why are you doing it? And he's like, well, I kind of want to explore other options. And he's like, okay, I see. Yeah, it's like, it was a hobby you picked up and now you don't want to do it. And it's like, it's really clear in that scene that he's, like, trying to, like, low-key shame Andrew into staying. It works perfectly, of course.
I was hoping to hear more insults.
Yeah, well, no, he's actually very, very mild in that scene. And they cut that whole thing because Andrew never considers dropping out in the final movie. But I thought that was interesting because in that case, he's, like, very deliberately reeling him in. And then after that is when he pulls him up in studio band. I thought that was interesting. And, you know, we don't have to, like, take that scene too seriously because ultimately it was cut. But I thought that was, like, an interesting thing to do.
Well, it makes sense why that was cut, right? So that that scene when they're in the bar and they're talking, Fletcher says, no, man, no, because, like, the next Charlie Parker would never be discouraged. You know, so it would be out of character for him to, like, reel Andrew in because, you know, like, the next Charlie Parker would never quit Schaefer. So, like, you know, I plus also, like, having a scene without J.K. Simmons being, like, furious, what's the point, you know?
Well, he's still really good in those scenes. It's to add to the fury, because if he's furious the whole time, then it kind of...
Well, exactly. Well, that's what, you know, like all those other scenes before when he's like, when he's sweet, he then becomes immediately angry. It's like, you know, first they're sour.
It makes him so much scarier.
Yeah, it's like, you know, so to have a scene where Fletcher's, like, genuinely just, like, a nice dude, I think would kind of defeat that height of his character.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's just, like, not quite necessary because, like, if Andrew really was about to drop out, then you lose so much of the heat of both characters because, like, then J.K. Simmons wouldn't be resting on Andrew's personal ambition, and Andrew's personal ambition would have faltered. Whereas, you know, we see him from the get, like, from start to finish, Andrew is, like, pushing himself to his limit until he hits this breaking point, and then he's like, well, what do I do now? And he passes by this, you know, this guy drumming on the street, and he just, like, looks away. But you can tell there's, like, something just getting under him. There's something, like, missing, happening to him. Yeah, he's got nothing else because he's put all his, you know, put all his skill points in one basket.
Yeah,
we never get, and this kind of put me off from watching the movie for a little bit. But then, you know, I ended up watching it anyway. I saw a comment in one of the insult compilations that you never figure out his backstory. You're never told why Fletcher is Fletcher. You know, you have that bit, that scene from the bar, but that's about the extent you get from it. Like, how do you, like, I asked my brother as well, and I was like, how do you feel about him not having some sort of anime origin story where you find out why he became what he became? And he said, and I agree with him, like, that he thinks it strengthens his character. Like, he thought giving Fletcher an origin would have just weakened the story.
I think it would have, yeah. I hadn't considered that, but I think it would be worse.
I don't know exactly why, though.
Maybe it makes him less mysterious. I feel like because we can't understand him, that's why he's scary. Maybe.
I think that's what it is. I think that's what my brother said. Like, I asked him, like, so, like, a Joker type thing where you don't know where he came from. You don't really know his motivations, so, like, that makes him that much more scary. He's just evil for the sake of being evil.
But I think it's interesting because he, and like this is true of most but not all villains, he very much doesn't, like, I think he sees himself as countercultural but not evil. He sees himself as willing to go farther.
Necessary.
I think, yeah, he understands that he has enemies. He understands that nobody else sees him as the good guy. But he believes very strongly in this philosophy and stands by it. So, like, yeah.
I also think it's interesting to bring in the idea of like the father-son relationship, right? Thinking about it as Andrew picking between two father figures, his actual father and the one who's going to push him to be what he wants to be. I think Fletcher fits that role perfectly. Of like, I mean, I assume you both know those dads who are like pushing their kids to be, well, like you talked about earlier, like pushing their kids to be the best, you know, baseball player of all time, and like pushing their kids to do all this stuff. And it's like, where is their motivation coming from? Like, why are they pushing? Like, is it because they see something of themselves in this pupil? Is it because they like, you know, they're insecure about themselves, so they're like forcing this other person to do it? You know, it could be any number of things. And like you said, that fear of the unknown, like, you know, in horror movies where it's like if you don't see the monster, it's kind of scarier.
Normally, it's because they failed to do it themselves. Yeah. So, like, for example, in Black Swan, the mother, I think she was also a ballerina. She failed. The mediocrity is what they're fearing and all that. But that's not the case for Fletcher, so that can't be it. So that just creates even more mystery, because you're like, really, what is his motivation? Because he's not a failure. He's a teacher at, you know, the top music company. Oh my God, top music college in the country. It's like, he's not a failure. So what is he doing?
And he says specifically, like, he never wanted to be Charlie Parker. He wanted to be the one to find that. Like, that was his dream from the start. I think going off of your point about like parents pushing their kids, I haven't seen this with parents exactly, but I know I've had a couple of coaches that, not with specific players, but like with the team, I can really, in retrospect, feel how they were like, they wanted to live out their like sports dreams that they missed out on at whatever age through like the 6th grade basketball team or whatever. They're like, we're going to win the championship because I didn't win. And they wouldn't say that specifically, but looking back, I'm kind of like, it was middle school, bro. Like, we didn't need to go that hard.
Like, chill out.
Yeah. So I feel like it's definitely there. And sometimes it is parental. I feel like I have a little bit more personal knowledge of like coaches doing that. And again, it's different with teams and with individuals because it's just a different dynamic there. But I think that's a real thing too. I think I just haven't, because I haven't been one of those like prodigy athletes, I haven't had that, like, I haven't seen that side of that coaching thing. I had one more question with Fletcher, which is, and maybe we've answered this already, what do we think of his philosophy that saying good job is a bad thing? Because I see where he's coming from, but I feel like just in general, like outside of coaching, outside of like any given medium, like even if you're just talking like how to play like a board game, I think to improve at something, you kind of need successes and failures, because if you only succeed, then you never like learn how to change your approach. So in that sense, I see the good job thing, like an empty good job, that can be harmful. But then like if you only fail, you never know when to stick with something and like what is a good strategy. Just on like a really broad scale, I think like you need both failure and success to learn and get better at something. So that's my thought. But like in terms of, I want to frame it around like, what do we think of him saying the worst 2 words in the English language are good job?
Well, it reminds me of, well, 2 things. This I definitely did want to talk about because I wanted to talk about Rilke's Letter to a Young Poet. But before that, you know, the idea of the generation that grew up with participation trophies.
I feel like Fletcher is such a response.
I'm pretty sure I have one of those still.
I have several participation trophies.
Exactly, right? And it's like, you know, wanting everybody to feel good and wanting to like celebrate mediocrity. And Fletcher's like, yeah, man, well,
everybody wins.
Yeah, and Fletcher literally said like, no wonder jazz is dying, you know. it's like no one's like pushing themselves that hard anymore because everyone's getting that like
validation, even if they don't deserve it.
But yeah, I think,
finish your sentence.
No, yeah, well, exactly, and I think also like in our culture, it's like really starting to fuck kids up, and I think people are like really noticing that it's fucking kids up because people are being like, oh yeah, or I've seen a few things posted here and there being like, yeah, raise your hand if you were the gifted kid in middle and high school and then went to college and realized you were middle of the pack and then now you're like burning out because you're not perfect at everything all the time and you don't know how to put in hard work, stuff like that. People are like not okay anymore.
Not everybody's special.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Fletcher's sort of fighting against that mentality too, which is funny because I feel like Damien Chazelle probably grew up around that time.
Yeah, I think he's like in his 30s now because he was young when he made this, like in known director's terms, he was young.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess if I'm gonna look him up, but I think ballpark age he would have been in school like from maybe like early 90s to like mid 2000s would be my guess.
Yeah, something like so he was probably sort of feeling the brunt of that too. And I'm sure that filtered into this philosophy split that he's dealing with. But back to Rilke's letters to a young poet. Have either of you read?
I have not.
Do you know who Rainer Maria Rilke is? He's a German poet, or was a German poet.
I've heard of him, I think, but I couldn't tell you anything about him.
So he was really famous in his time, and he was like really well known. And there was a student who was like starting to write poetry, who started writing letters to Rilke. I mean, this is like the equivalent of, one of us reaching out to Ryan Johnson and him being like, yeah, I'll give you some advice. Sure. Like, I'll give you the time of day. It like nuts. You know what I mean? So there are these 10 letters that I don't know who someone compiled. They're all just one side. They're all like Rilke's letters to the young poet. We never, I think we find out the name. I can't remember what it is. But basically in the first letter he says to the young poet, he says, listen, I can't tell you what's right or wrong with your poetry. I know what I like to write. I know my own style, and obviously this is wildly paraphrased, but he says like the worst thing for you right now as an up and coming poet is criticism. Like the worst thing that you could possibly pay attention to is people telling you what's good and what's bad.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's this idea of good job, right? Like, but in both directions. It's like, you're taking someone else's ideas of quality and you're like using that to influence what you're doing, and suddenly it's not truthful to you anymore, and you lose yourself in the art. And it's sort of it gets warped and out of shape, and then you lose your passion and stuff like that. And this also filters back into the movie when Andrew's back home. He's showing his dad like all the cuts and burns and stuff on his hands from the sticks, and his dad says, "So his opinion is really important to you, isn't it?" And Andrew's like, "Yeah, it is." And it's back to that idea of like, where are you getting your criticism? Andrew picked Schaefer. He picked this one guy from this one program, the best program in the country, to be his mentor, to be his criticism, his external validation. It's like completely outside of himself. In the face of Letters to a Young Poet, like that's the worst decision he could have made, because it's no longer his own art,
But that makes me think of the dinner table scene where Andrew says it's objective, not subjective, like the jazz competitions. So it's like, are they? Like, I don't...
Yeah.
But the being chosen as the top music school in the country, isn't that subjective? Like, I don't how do you measure that? How do you decide, all right, this school over this school, that's number one, that's number two? Like,
yeah.
It's not math, but I
there's probably metrics there, but they're probably all subjective, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple things there. One, just first following up real quick, Damien Chazelle was born in 1985, just for context there. Look that up. Something that's interesting in terms of like prodigies, this was something they talked about on the podcast script notes a couple months back. They were kind of, I think I may have mentioned this to you, Nick. They were talking about like why do we not hear about writer prodigies so much? Whereas you do sometimes hear about that like 12-year-old who like wins the world champion in chess, or the 6-year-old who can like play the hell out of a violin or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas you never hear about like some 10-year-old who's a great writer. And I think they kind of broke that down over a couple episodes, and they were sort of like, well, I think for writing specifically, you need that sort of life experience to actually say something meaningful. There's only so much you can say as a 10-year-old, especially like, you know, most 10-year-olds are like barely considered literate, or I don't know, depending on what you define as literate, but they're not like, they don't have like the technical chops to do that.
Yeah, I've seen some recent stuff from like poems and stuff that I've written when I was young. My dad just sent me something I wrote about my brother when I was in 4th grade, and I repeated myself so many times in one paragraph, and I
hate reading my old writing.
Oh my god!
I need a stiff ass drink to get through. Things.
It was in snap italic font, like the goofy looking, like dog. That was my favorite font when I was in like 4th grade, and I
snap italic. I don't know that one. I'm gonna have to look into that.
It looks like bubbles, like ink bubbles. It's the strangest thing, but I use that for everything.
I think also like snap italic.
I'm looking it up right now.
I think writing is also more subjective. You know what I mean? Like so at the dinner party, so Andrew says, no, it's not subjective. It is objective. There are metrics for like who is better than whom. And I think, well, to bring in two other things, Anthony Doerr and Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So Zen, the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, in it has this idea that quality is the bridge or like the parent of subjectivity and objectivity. That, you know, you can have things that are subjectively quality and objectively quality. So I think, you know, certain things lie on one side or the other, but in terms of art forms, right, music is probably... Obviously, it's a huge split between the two, but in like jazz drumming, it's probably closer to objective. With writing, you know, you have like all of these ideas that are dependent so heavily on the audience. They depend so heavily on the audience. And Anthony Doerr, he's one of my favorite writers. He curated this anthology of short stories, and he wrote at the beginning about his process for picking the best short stories of 2019. He's like, so I started this Excel spreadsheet, and I was, you know, doing it based on like how much they made me laugh, and you know, he had these like these different metrics, and they would get points, and he would tally the points, and that's how he would decide to do, you know. And then he said, like, at a certain point, I just like hated what I was doing, and I hated the stories I was reading because I was like just tallying points, and it wasn't fun at all. So he said he completely scrapped it. And he tried again, and any story that he kept thinking about, any story that really stuck with him, he would put in there. And he talked about his own process for starting to become a writer, how there was a short story competition coming up for his school, and the winner would get to meet this like famous writer. And he was like freaking out because he's like, oh, but I love writing short stories. And he wrote, you know, this thing about like this story that like took the perspective of a dog and of a neighbor, and it had like 3 plot lines and, you know, all these things, and it was like so much fun, and he had a blast writing it. And then after writing it, he picked up a book by like one of the best editors in the world on short stories about like the elements of a short story and what makes them good. The guy was like, so it can't take any perspectives other than the main character, and it should be extremely streamlined, only one plot line, only like as few characters as possible. So like he, you know, Anthony Doerr like chucked out his old one, and he wrote something that was in line with these metrics. And then his best friend ended up winning the competition, and his best friend like turned to him, he's like, oh my god, I can't believe I won. I completely, you know, I like didn't care about that at all. I wrote that in like 2 hours. And so it's just going back to the idea of quality in terms of writing, I think, is so subjective.
Yeah.
And like, you know, Andrew's philosophy that jazz drumming is not subjective.
Who chose that guy as the best editor in the world? Like, why?
Exactly. Like what?
Is there
what are you
an editing
about?
committee? Like, who the hell?
Who
picks him?
And
Yeah.
some of the short stories in that anthology are fucking awesome. They're so good, and they like some of them make very little sense, but they're hilarious and they're like crazy, and they take multiple perspectives, and they're like wild. Yeah, it's so, quality.
Part of it with, I think, storytelling, and I guess a lot of art things too, is like originality. Like sometimes something is great because it's not like everything else. Whereas I think,
Right.
and maybe that's true of music. I don't know enough about music to really speak on that, but I feel like maybe a better example is like gymnastics, maybe, because like that's rated on a very like specific scale, or any of those like Olympic events. Like I think all the skiing ones tend to be this too, where it's like you get rated on this scale, and there's certain elements that they're breaking down. Like, okay, you did this to this extent, whatever.
How difficult was
diving?
Yeah, how
too.
difficult was the thing? Diving, diving is another one. There's kind of like specific things you can do, but also like they're not trying to create anything new usually. I mean, people can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how many ski flips there are under the sun, like that you could possibly do. But there is an objectivity more so to some things than others.
I mean, wasn't Simone Biles doing something new, and they told her they banned the move that she was trying to do because she was too good at it?
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
It's like unfair or something. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Olympics, like, I watched the podcast, Damn Internet, You Scary. Shout out to them about this, and they banned the move she was trying to do, or she accomplished, because they deemed it as too black woman, by the way, they deemed it as too dangerous for other athletes or gymnasts to attempt down the line. And it's like, isn't that the point of gymnastics? To try and like do some crazy shit that nobody else has seen before? Like,
The Iron Lotus, yeah.
made no sense to me. It was like some quadruple something or other, and it's like they banned, like, really? I don't know.
Yeah,
It's weird.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, at that point, I would say, like, don't do it for self-preservation, but that doesn't mean you should ban it. It's,
Right.
like, completely different.
If you can do it, fuck around and find out,
Yeah. There was a point that I think both of you made that I want to return to real quick, which is for getting introduced. It was you were talking about it with the Rilke thing, about like criticism isn't good for beginners. I feel like I see that sometimes with like people who will say to me like, I took screenwriting 1, I don't know if I want to keep going with it, and I'll ask them like, okay, what did your professor do? And I don't know if you guys have had this experience or heard this from other people, but I feel like a lot of them will say, I don't know, it was so like I felt like I couldn't do it right. Like there were so many rules with all these things, because most people are not familiar, like even those who have written pretty well throughout their life, like they don't, the screenplay format is a difficult thing to learn, and like a lot of times in those intro courses you gotta like really learn it. And I didn't have that same experience, because by the time I got there, I had like spent 6 months too long learning how to do it correctly on my own.
And it's crazy because the rules in screenwriting are meant to be broken anyway. Because
Right.
I saw through the lessons from the screenplay video, like the way you're not supposed to describe, you're only supposed to describe what's happening on screen, but they're like describing the feelings, and I'm like, this was an official script that was made into a fucking movie, and y'all told us not to do this from day one. Like, are you serious?
Right.
Exactly.
And I think like I think sometimes for those intro courses that's fine, but like in terms of like the context of like just starting out in something, I don't like how I hear people who like maybe want to get into it and are trying out this class get discouraged from that, because they're like, I felt like I couldn't figure out how to do it right. There were so many things, and I think it's important for them to learn those things. Like those are still good lessons to have. But I see and hear like when people talk about it, they seem like they're getting discouraged from starting off, and I'll try to like kind of maybe not build them back from that, but just be like, that's not everything, and if you want to do it, like I would encourage to keep going, but like I'm not the one grading them, so
It's like a basis, and from there you develop your own style.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you just find out how everybody else does it, you figure out why it works, why it doesn't, and then you just make your own way of writing from there.
Yeah, and well, I think part of it too is that it should be engaging. Maybe this is slightly off topic, but I was talking to a friend of all of ours, I think, or at least an acquaintance. You guys know?
Yes.
I'll bleep his name out. He's been like teaching me how to do some stuff like skateboarding recently. He's a writer as well, but he has been showing me like this certain side of skating, like it's called transition skating, which is like when you go on like the bowls and stuff. And like I'm not very good at it yet, but I've been getting a lot better over like the past few weeks and months that we've been doing it. And there's another side of it called street, where like that's like where you see the guys doing like kick flips and ollies and stuff. I may not have the terminology correct there. But,
fun fact: skating was added to the Olympics this year.
Yep, and I watched it. It was pretty cool. Yeah, 13-year-olds winning gold medals. Go check it out. Go check it out, dude. It's awesome.
Dog, I can barely stand up straight, so the fact that anybody can do any of that is like, it's crazy.
Yeah. Long and short of it is like, I was kind of saying like, I think if I did street stuff, like the little that I've tried doing it, it's so hard to like get anything right with it, and it's not really fun to do. I'm not doing anything crazy with like transition skating right now. I'm still new to it, and like I've gotten better, but it's also like fun to do. Like there's definitely challenges and some things that are like really scary to do the first couple times, but like when I do it right, I enjoy it, and I can still build up from that. And I feel like there is sometimes like more of a gatekeeping thing where it feels more like how I was like describing street, where it's like you have to I feel like to do some of that stuff, I'd have to do it wrong like 500 times, and it just wouldn't be a good time before I got it right once. And then after that, maybe I could get the muscle memory and be good, but there's a huge threshold there. Whereas like transition skating is just kind of like an extension of riding my board. And I think that can be true of like other things too, where it's like, if you're failing so much at the start, you're gonna maybe give up unless you really want it. And I think it's hard to know if you really want it right away when you're just getting into it.
What's that thing that the master has failed more times than the amateur has even tried, or something like that?
Wow.
There's also
never heard it, but I believe it.
I mean, Stephen King, he tells a story about I think it was an interview with him and George R.R. Martin, which is hilarious because there was this one point. This is a side note, by the way. There was this one point when George R.R. Martin was like, "All right, I got a question for you." They're interviewing each other, and George R.R. Martin's like, "How do you write so fucking fast?" And Stephen King was talking about like consistency and whatever. But anyways, Stephen King was talking about how he would send like pieces of writing into publishers and would hear nothing, like nothing. And then one day he finally got a rejection letter, and he was so happy that he hung it up on the wall. And then he kept getting yeah, exactly, because he finally got something back. And then he started getting he kept getting rejection letters, and he kept hanging them up on the wall until the pin was too short, and they all fell out of the wall. So he had to get a longer nail. And then he finally started getting rejection letters that had like little notes in them that said like, "Hey, like we can't accept this, but I liked how you did this, and I wish we could see this in the future." Well, and so he finally started getting like a little bit of feedback there, and like more and more feedback, and then finally one of them accepted it, and he started getting published, and then he started like it was that process.
I'm about to start following what Stephen King did, because I have a few rejection letters of my own, but they're not from the publishers, they're from the agents to talk to the publishers. So I'm about to print out some emails I have.
All right, so the next topic we had, Nick, this was something you wanted to bring up, was efficiency of the scenes.
That was something that I wrote down before rewatching it, because I just remembered how tight this movie was. Yeah, I think I wrote down. I just recently watched. I think Trey Parker and Matt Stone went to NYU to give a lecture, and I saw like a little piece of it. Yeah, and they were talking about when you're plotting out scenes, how a lot of writers will be like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and anytime you say "and then," you should just cut that scene, because nothing is actually propelling you into it. The transition words should be therefore or but, because it's like therefore this happens, but this happens, therefore this happens. And I think Whiplash follows a lot of that.
Like causality, maybe?
Yeah, making sure that there's like a really strong connection between scenes. Obviously, it switches back and forth between, moments in studio band and moments of him with his girlfriend. So they're not like, directly related necessarily, but they do have a lot of overlap in terms of the overall philosophy of the movie, right? So you have the opening scene where you get this sense of the protagonist and the antagonist, and then you get but he's interested in girls. and it continues on like that, where it's like this happens, therefore like the folder, or like he has to, Tanner trusts him with the folder, but he loses it, therefore he goes on stage and he does really well, therefore like he, it just keeps pushing forward that way. And I think the role and the pacing of it was really solid, the way that it just kept like the story just kept unfolding. I don't think I ever hit a point where I was like, why am I watching this, or like, why is this happening?
Right.
And I thought that was wildly impressive, just the efficiency of the whole movie,
On that point, like piggybacking off of that, I wanted to mention the last scene. That's a very good point Nick made about like you never asked why you were watching the scenes. I never asked that. Like I can get bored very easily when watching anything, especially if it's not action heavy. So the fact that this movie kept my attention the entire time, and then specifically, I'm about to go on a rant here, the last scene in particular, like I stood up physically exhausted after that entire last scene because I was tense the entire time. From Fletcher screwing Andrew over with the pick of the song to Andrew walking back on stage to the credits, I was glued to my laptop screen. And I didn't even realize how little dialogue there was because I was just stuck watching and listening to the drums and Fletcher's reactions, Andrew's reactions to him silently mouthing "fuck you." I hung on every note, every beat, and it was insane. I don't think I've ever been that captivated by a movie before. So big props to this movie because I have no idea why that happened. Well, maybe, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's I think why it struck me so hard too, because I was like, I did the same thing when I first watched it. I was like, what?
Yeah.
It happened again. I mean, I was sitting there like trying to take notes, right? And like I just put my phone down. I was like, I can't. I just gotta watch this. I'll think back to it later, but I just gotta watch this through. Put my phone on silent and flipped it upside down. I'm like, it's me in the movie now.
I can't say that I've had that same like roller coaster reaction with that scene. I don't want to say that like it's an amazing scene. I think it just, like I said at the beginning, I think that's one of those things that just somehow it doesn't hit for me the way it should. And that's very much a me problem. Nothing against this movie. I'm just a bad viewer for it, I guess. But
maybe it's because the music never stops. Maybe that's
I think it gets a little bit like I got a little exhausted with it at this point, and like I think that's part of it is like if you're on that ride, like that's great. Like I think I have that watching Mad Max Fury Road, where I've heard some people say like it gets exhausting, and I'm like here for it the whole time. And I think that final scene, like it has so many like swings and momentum that like it can be that captivating. I just have never quite gotten into it. I think I may have had it spoiled for me for one.
And when he fixed the symbol instead of throwing it at him.
So good, yeah.
After he got hit in the face with it like 2 minutes earlier. He was like, I will gouge your motherfucking. And they got hit with the like, and then he fixed this. Oh my god, bro. That whole
when they get on the same wave, yeah. When they
and he walks up to him, and he's like, "Bring it down," and then he tells him to pick the tempo back. Oh, come on,
yeah,
man.
because it's like, oh, he is still my coach. Like, oh, he is still, like we like.
There's like a mutual respect that's gained in that scene,
and it's the realization, like, oh, we are going for the same thing. Like,
exactly.
we're trying to do the same thing. It's this toxic world that we're both on opposite sides of, but we need to work together to get to this point.
Right.
So fucking good.
And I like how most of the shots were only on those two. Like they didn't cut to They did cut to the father at one point when he went back on stage, but like between that, it was the drums, Andrew, and Fletcher. That entire scene, like
there's a little bit of like showing the rest of the band as they get into it, but I think for most of it, like it kind of glosses over them like montage style.
Yeah.
The thing that I would say for this topic is just like I think, and maybe both of you mentioned this earlier, I think there's a very clear purpose for every scene. Like I hadn't noticed efficiency necessarily, but I think you can clearly point to like there is a function for that scene that it's very clearly doing, and I think that plays into the causality that you were talking about, Nick, where it's like this scene needs to be there so that this can happen, and it's never like there's never anything that's like dead space. It feels very intentional. Like nothing's even done for like spectacle. Like I never even feel like Damien Chazelle's like I want this song in it because it's a cool jazz song. Let's make a scene for that. No, it's like everything is very centered around this, like showing either exposing something about these two characters or progressing the plot along. Which I know we were kind of knocking screenwriting one, but I think that is a rule that is pretty good to stick to most of the time,
and even within
especially on a budget. Sorry.
Yeah. Even within the scene, like even on a sort of underneath the scene level, like every line of dialogue felt efficient. I mean every I was like hanging on every word. Like at the beginning when his dad gets hit in the head with the popcorn, and he says sorry. Like what is that like his first line?
Yep.
When he puts the Raisinets in there and Andrew's like I'm gonna pick around it, and the dad's like I don't understand you. I was like, yo, you know what I mean? I mean, he literally says from the get-go, he says, I don't understand you. But he's still, like, willing to support his son, and Andrew's, like, making it harder for himself just to, like, have his dad be happy. It's just, it's so good. Like, every line has its intention, and, yeah, Evan, like, we were even talking about...
Even the insults. The insults.
Yeah.
Especially the insults.
Yeah. And Evan, you were talking about this before. Was it Jelani? Was it you of talking about when he and Nicole first meet up at the pizza shop?
That was
talking about. Yeah. When they were like talking about their majors and stuff like that. Like every line in there had something to do with their life philosophies. Right. And when he talked about his dad, he says, my dad and I still go to the movies, and she scoots her foot closer to him so they can like be touching, and it's like what is important for her, that family is important in her eyes, and that like being homesick was kind of like her leading into that line exactly,
like,
and
this
is
is what they're connecting over.
And so he makes his decision away from Nicole and away from his dad. And then in the end, he like sort of comes back, but all of that is set up in like just a few lines of dialogue. Like it's hyper efficient.
I think if I looked at it more, I might see more of that efficiency because I've never thought it was inefficient. I just had never that had never stuck out to me. So I'm glad we brought that up.
I thought they were gonna play Whiplash for the final thing. They played Caravan, and then they went into Whiplash, and I was like, that's even better. It's even better for the credits.
Well, it's also because it was based. It's also partly because this was originally a short.
Oh.
And yeah, I was watching part of it before this. I didn't get through the whole thing. From what I saw, like they did the first scene when Andrew like enters studio band, like when he's still an alternate for Tanner. It's basically that is like almost exactly the same. It's not the same setup. It has the guy who plays young Neil from Scott Pilgrim is playing Andrew, and then it's still J.K. Simmons as Fletcher. He asks, so what do you play? And he says, wow, Zelda, Tetris. Sorry, I really wanted to make that joke. Yeah, but like from what I saw, it's almost exactly the same. With Whiplash is like the big song in that scene. So I think that might have been why, and maybe it is cool that they end on.
I mean, he probably also got whiplash from the car accident.
Yeah. So speaking of the car crash, this will transition us into the last topic I have, which is comparing protagonists from other things. So the things that I compare this to or found myself comparing it to, is Black Swan, Devil Wears Prada, and Mean Girls. And I'm mad because Beyond the Screenplay just put out their podcast on Whiplash 3 days ago, and they also did this, but I thought of it first, goddammit. I love them. Anyway, all 4 of those movies I noticed, I think I may have mentioned this when we did Devil Wears Prada, all 4 of them have a character get hit by a car.
Why?
At some
like,
point.
that's so specific. Like, is it a reality check, maybe? Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
Memento Mori.
Yeah, in Black Swan, it happens off screen. But all the other ones, it's, like, really random. And I feel like it's all different, like, a character that has a different role. Because, like, in the other 3, it's a minor character, sometimes really minor, that gets hit. Like, this is the only one where the protagonist is the one who gets hit.
I mean,
by the car.
in Devil Wears Prada, didn't 2 people get hit? Didn't she get hit, but it, like, wasn't severe? And then... Oh, no. Was it just Emily Blunt?
Yeah, it's just Emily Blunt. But I think there's, like, a moment where, like, Andy almost gets hit.
Okay.
But it's, like, it's a really small... Like, it's just a little background noise part of a montage or something. All 4 of those, somebody gets, like, severely injured in a car accident. Right. And, like, sometimes it's a little more comical. Like, Mean Girls, Regina George just gets, like, randomly taken out by the bus.
Like Final Destination? That's what I'm picturing. Jesus.
Yeah. Like, Mean Girls is kind of played for laughs, but I was noticing, like, they're all, like, kind of variations on the same kind of character arc. And all of them have that. That's a little weird.
It's really specific. I'm sorry. Like, I don't understand that.
Yeah. So, to extend the comparison, so we've referenced this video a couple times. There's a great Lessons from the Screenplay video about Black Swan versus Whiplash. And this is almost turning into a plug for them, but they happen to, right now as we're recording this, like, this past week on their podcast Beyond the Screenplay, they just did Whiplash, and next week they're doing Black Swan. So...
Coincidence? I think not.
I was mad that they did it first, but whatever.
If you're listening, shout outs to y'all.
I saw, like, a comparison of these 4 because, like, I feel like Black Swan and Whiplash are, like, obviously the darker, more adult versions. Like, they're both rated R, and the other 2 are PG-13, and they're kind of more, like, they're a lot lighter in tone, but they all kind of have these arcs for the protagonist where they're going down this, like, into, like, a darker version of themselves, where they're, like, getting really into this new ideology. The major difference that I saw between them is, like, Devil Wears Prada and Mean Girls, those 2 protagonists are almost there by accident. Like, or maybe not by accident, but, like, when they're getting deeper into, like, their respective
It's not their goal off the bat.
Right, it's a means to an end. It's like Katie just wants to survive high school. Andy just needs to, like, get through this job. Like, neither of them want to be the thing that they're becoming. And very importantly, they both kind of get that reality check right before, like, the climax or whatever, right at the end, where they're like, oh, I'm turning into something terrible here. Now I'm going to back off. And then with Black Swan and Whiplash, we get both of them want to be there. Like, this is the thing that they have, like, strived to be forever. And they end up completing it. Like, they never get that reality check where they're like, maybe this is too much. They both end up fully committing. So I think it's just an interesting way to do it. The 2 other, I guess I was going to say 2. Monsters University also does this. Again, I won't go into that for spoilers. But 2 other definitely more adult takes on this idea are The Queen's Gambit, the recent show, and then The Prestige are kind of versions of a thing where it's like a character really excelling at something, but there's also a lot of sacrifice involved. I feel like those both are a little bit more on the, like, Whiplash, Black Swan side of things.
I also like that they compared... I think the reality checks were at different points. And I'm, again, shout outs to Lessons from the Screenplay. This is from that video. But the reality checks were at different points, and each of them were different things for Black Swan and Whiplash. I think it was Sean Casey, him killing himself over being Fletcher's protege or student. that came like later in the movie, and then in the beginning or towards the beginning half, it's the what was it? Something with a B.
Beth. Yeah.
Beth.
The one who gets hit by a car.
Yeah.
That would be.
It's that, but Andrew chooses to stop, and I'm thinking of the graphic they put up with the lines. Andrew chooses to stop at that moment when he sees it. Nina chooses to pursue it and continue despite the warning, and it ends up destroying, well, spoilers, it ends up destroying her in the end.
And I think, like, I haven't really looked at Queen's Gambit or The Prestige in that sense, but I think it would be interesting to see both of those points as well. I'm not thinking of one for the Queen's Gambit, but I feel like The Prestige, there's, like, definitely, because that also is a dual protagonist story where, like, you kind of see Borden and Angier's different philosophies on magic, and like how they also, like, in comparing to like what we're talking about with Whiplash, I think each of them has a separate line for what is sacrificing too much for the perfect magic trick, and that's kind of part of like where they come into conflict.
Is that what this Prestige is about? Magic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it. Well, I won't spoil it for you because I know you haven't seen it. It's really good.
So good.
Is it as good as Now You See Me?
From what I hear, it's much better, but I haven't seen
It's
Now
pretty
You See
close.
Me.
Oh, I know. I've seen both. Yeah, the Prestige is better.
Yeah, I've heard people. I don't know. Now You See Me, I've heard is like.
What about Now You See Me Too?
Oh, that one's on its own plane. You know?
Yeah. But anyway, I think it's just interesting to compare those because they're very similar stories, and I think all of them are good in their own way. And there's obviously different nuances with like the different worlds that they're set in, but it's just an interesting way to look at character arcs where it's like Andy and Katie basically are at the same place beginning to end, but they go through more of like a rocky kind of arc. Like they are changed at the end. They're just like a little.
They've had their eyes open.
Right. They've had their eyes open. They've like gone to the dark side, but not all the way. Whereas, and like, I don't want to say dark side in the sense that like that's where Andrew and Nina necessarily end up, but
I mean,
I think you could argue for sure. I mean, Black Swan, I'd say, is a lot more of a dark side. But
she embraced it and then had sex with it.
Yep. Yeah.
She embraced it biblically.
Very biblically. I like that we have both. Like, I kind of enjoy the more like, or I guess I vibe more thematically with the like PG-13 version, where it's like, I learned my lesson. Now I'm gonna go be a normal person. Whereas, like, but I really love that we get this more adult version with it, where it's like, you could do this. You could become Lance Armstrong and be the best biker in the goddamn world, like winning every race or whatever. It just comes at a price.
Write it up, yeah.
I wonder, like, how the Queen's Gambit handles it, because that's out of what every one of these movies is about. So that's the only objective thing that the protagonist is crazy, the only objective passion. So I wonder how, I might have to watch it, I wonder how they handle that as opposed to everything else on this list, where it's like, you're only as great as, like, everyone sees you, right? I don't know.
It's the objectivity that Andrew was talking about too, right? Like at the dinner party, saying like, no, it's objective. I mean, it's harder to see, I think, from an untrained ear, like sort of the average audience member / you know, the football player at the dinner table. With Queen's Gambit, it's like, you know, you see the chess match. Have you both seen it?
I have.
No, I haven't.
So basically, like, during the chess matches, like, you see the chess matches, and it's like, oh, whoa, she did something, and everyone goes, and that's how you know that it's a good thing. and then it's like, and then, the other person stands up and shakes her hand, and it's like, yeah, you won, and that's how you know that, like, she won.
Right, they do some shorthand for people who aren't good at / don't know chess.
Exactly, you see the audience go, and it's like, oh, okay, she did something cool.
One of the pieces is called Bishop.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my knowledge.
But it's actually funny that you bring up Lance Armstrong too, because there's the whole steroid thing where, like,
oh yeah. Well, wait, wasn't he blood doping?
Something like that, yeah. And
I guess it doesn't really matter because steroids is all over sports too.
Yeah,
so
he was on some bullshit. I think they did a test once, and the only, like, top placing cyclist who in the Tour de France who was not at all connected to drugs placed like 27th or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, no, in the Queen's Gambit, like, and she's taking this like thing that makes her soupy and really good.
Oh yeah.
And like she's fighting, and that brings in the black swan of, like, are you gonna push yourself to insanity?
No.
And that's kind of another facet of it, I guess, as well as, like, if you don't stop. If you don't choose to call it quits, what's the end? You know what I mean? Because like I think someone was talking about this earlier about, like, well, you could have stopped here, you could have stopped there, you could have stopped there, and we also were talking about sort of the moments of, like, being aware of it and, like, reality checks. If you don't take up one of those reality checks and take it seriously, where do you end up, finally? And are you, and like we talked about at the very beginning, actually, too, is like, you're taking that gamble of, will you hit genius before you hit insanity? Like, which one comes first?
Yeah.
And right at the very end, you're like, those two are coming, like, neck and neck. You know what I mean? Probably, I haven't seen Mean Girls in a long time, and I haven't seen Devil Wears Prada in a long time. But, like, you sort of get to that point of, like, those two are competing. Like, right up at the end,
I think there's a little more of a safety net with them. I feel like there is, where it's like, I'm never scared. I feel like it was more so with Katie and Mean Girls. Like, I feel like I could more realistically see her becoming Regina George than I do with Andy becoming Miranda. That aside, like, I think you're right about the thing where it's like, with Whiplash specifically, Andrew almost turns to, like, I think him walking off the stage, theoretically, we could say that ends in insanity, depending on how broken up he is about that failure.
Well, he beats the shit out of Fletcher, too.
Well, oh, yeah. Well, that, too. Right,
Like,
that does happen earlier in the movie. Like,
yeah.
If that's not insanity, I guess that's his, like, insane moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of don't blame him, though. Like, wouldn't you kind of be pissed off if you...
He's abused, yeah.
But also, like, I
he was bleeding on the kid.
But also, like, he still walked the rest of the way to the concert after getting hit by a car.
Yeah.
That's not a good
normal.
decision.
Yeah.
Evan, he wanted to part, Evan.
You don't get it. He wanted
I'm
to
not
part,
saying
though.
I don't understand it. I'm saying it's still a bad idea.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, we have that where, like, he sacrificed so much that, like, he did reach that insanity level, and he reached the greatness level. They are close to each other.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe some of it just depends on what do you mean by greatness, like, when are you satisfied, that kind of thing.
I mean, with Black Swan, they both met at the end.
They really met one another, yeah.
If you took a shot every time I said "what the fuck" in that last act, you'd be blackout drunk, bro.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. They got to know each other biblically. Yeah.
Again, I do want to see a sports version of this, though, because I think
that'd be good. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not the only person to have said this, but, like, I've expressed once or twice before on the show, like, my frustration with sports movies and how I think they tend to be a little bit cheesy. But Moneyball's not a sports movie. That's a business movie.
Sports management movie.
It's a business movie disguised as a sports movie.
Fair enough.
But there are so many examples of athletes who do, like, think about how many people have, I think of baseball mostly, have been caught doing steroids. Like there is, and I've never sympathized with that. I think because it's probably because I had a lot of baseball players that I loved as a kid that ended up getting caught doing steroids, and I was like so disappointed in them at that point.
And A-Rod was one of the big ones. I think,
oh yeah, well he wasn't a disappointment for me because I grew up as a Red Sox fan, so that was just validation at that point.
Wow.
See, I knew it wasn't. It wasn't us.
No, but David Ortiz was a little bit, or no, Manny Ramirez was so betrayed. I felt so betrayed as a kid when I found out about Manny Ramirez. I think there is so much of that drive, that pressure to like be the best, and I feel like baseball is the sport where you hear the most about like performance enhancing drug use, but I'm sure it's not the only one. Yeah. And there are, I'm sure, so many stories of athletes who have done the whiplash thing where they either do become the greatest or they push themselves their entire childhood to get into the NFL or whatever, and then they don't, and what do they do now? Like, again, like, I don't think it's a bad thing to push yourself, but I do think there is kind of that danger of sports movie and just sports stories in general, like the narratives we create around great athletes, where it's like, I feel like one of the only themes you can have in a sports movie is just persistence. You just gotta keep working hard, and then you're gonna get the win, bro. Like, that feels like it's usually that, or it's teamwork, or both, or something. Like, that's about the only two themes you can have. But that narrative where it's like, this is how you become the best, I feel like that's so much more glorified with sports.
So you want to break it down?
What do you mean?
Like, you want to get rid of that? You want to go against that?
I kind of do. Partly because I think we would just get better sports movies out of it, but also because I think it's just more honest, and it gives less of this idea that, like, when you do succeed, it's all like sunshine and roses and you become Tom Brady. I don't know the process of Tom Brady becoming him. There are theories that he's an alien or whatever, and not actually, like, there's something going on with him having 7 Super Bowl wins or whatever he has now.
I mean, we've never seen him and an alien in the same room before. So.
I don't know if that would prove anything, but yeah. There's no way of knowing. I feel like it's just a much more nuanced take. I feel like sports movies are so simplified, where it's just like, winning is everything, or we learned and we got better, so that was everything. And
all right,
it's like,
let's write it then, Evan.
The real lesson was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah.
I'm challenging you on podcasts. You probably cut this, but I kind of want to write that with you. Let's co-write something like that.
Can it be about frisbee golf? Because that's the sport. That's a sport that I would actually.
What? I thought you would say baseball, and I'd be like, all right, I kind of want to do basketball. Maybe we'll find some sort of happy medium. But you just went fucking left, bro. Frisbee
Have I
golf.
told you that I love frisbee golf. I play like it. I haven't played much recently, but I play it. It's fun. You should try it.
You want to do a gritty, realistic story about a frisbee golf player?
Actually, that's now that I'm actually thinking about it, that's not going to work because frisbee golf culture is like all stoners.
You wake up at 3 a.m. and walk out, and you link up the chain, and you're like, it's like raining. You're like,
oh my god, the slow motion of the frisbee going through the rain and the droplets hitting it. Come, Evan, that could be a comedy.
It could. We could make a Nacho Libre style sports movie.
Oh my, we could.
Because literally, like, I am like one of the only people I've played who, like, I know that plays disc golf that isn't like a huge stoner.
I've played a few times. I've played a few times. I'll play with you.
Yeah,
I played it in
but
gym.
You're not, like, I'm
not into
I'm down,
it. No,
I'm down to
like
play disc golf with you by all means, but like, you just
not like into it.
I don't no, but like people who are into that culture, like, it's so laid back. Like, nobody is. Like,
same with hacky sacks.
Yeah.
They look like they smell bad, dude.
Yeah. I even, like, a guy that I've played with before, who I found out is, like, actually, like, excelling very much in disc golf, is, like, he's a totally chill guy.
Is he going to the league?
Yeah, he's like, he's getting all sorts of notoriety.
Wait, I was joking. Is there a frisbee golf league?
Is he winning nationals?
There's one, like, at the course near Drexel. But yeah, I was watching the disc golf world championships a couple nights ago.
On ESPN 8 The Ocho.
No, it's like they record. Oh my god, they. Sorry for getting us into a frisbee golf tangent. It's fun. Go play. Hit me up if you want to play with me in our area. It's fun.
Okay, let's do it. Yeah, I'm gonna get real serious. I'm gonna have like a headband and everything.
I don't think they wear headbands.
I'm gonna get real serious about it.
Anyway, sports movies though. Make a Whiplash sports movie about maybe not frisbee golf. God.
I don't even know. Like, what are the costumes for frisbee golf? Is it just shorts and a t-shirt?
Okay, sorry. Costumes? What do you think?
Sorry,
do
uniforms.
cleats, like...
Yeah, like.
People.
What's the?
I
Is
just
it
wear
turf?
whatever.
Are you in your Vans? Like.
Vans are required. They're a league requirement.
Yeah, all white Vans.
Nah, there's no uniform. I mean, you dress. I don't know. People come in like I don't wear anything too nice. You get all in like thorn bushes and stuff. Stuff gets ripped up. You don't want to wear like.
No,
it gets rough.
Frisbee golf. I just don't know the world. You know what I mean?
Me neither.
I know it very limited, but like I play. So.
Yeah.
That I find it funny because that was just not. That was probably the last thing I was expecting next to like fucking croquet. Like I don't.
I must have never.
Do you disc, bro?
Playing frolf. Nobody said that. That actually is like the best way to trigger a frisbee golfer is to call it frolf.
Oh my god.
I must have never mentioned that to you.
No.
Because I do play it like a decent amount.
You have never once told me that.
I was waiting for 21 Jump Street when there's the scene where he throws the disc back into the lake.
Yeah.
I like reacted so much when that happened because I've had so many discs go in the water. I was like, oh, that's like the worst thing you could do. When he's like, throw a fucking frisbee. I was like, oh no, oh, that's so heartbreaking. $10.
Not the disc.
Anyway,
It's hilarious.
Whiplash though.
Yeah.
One little, if we're basically done, I did have one little bit of trivia. I had a friend who is a drummer who one time told me, like, he was just talking about drumming, and he was like, oh yeah, that scene where he punches through a snare drum or whatever the drum is that he punches through, apparently, according to him, he would, like, break his hand or break his wrist first. Those things are, like, too hard.
Real time.
I don't care. I just remembered him saying that. I wanted to bring that up.
I think
It did look like it was made of paper.
Yeah, yeah. Miles Teller was also like I mean, he trained to be like a drummer, but he's also like apparently they were not synced up like at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to also show that like he's supposed to be like the greatest drummer of all time by the end of this,
but
and Miles Teller is an actor. Like he can't.
Not the greatest drummer of all time. Yeah.
Right, but I think they did a good job with him. Like
it looked good.
I think I did catch. I was looking for some of the sync things, and there is a little out of syncness.
His faces when he's just going ham on the drums looks.
He looks like the greatest drummer of all time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else for comparison or protagonists, or anything else on frisbee golf? Or
Nolan maybe.
Nolan.
We'll make the Paul Macbeth biopic someday, Jelani. Once he has a more prolific career, we can collab on that.
Who?
He's like the world's best frisbee golfer.
Oh, you expected me to know that, Evan?
Like, I didn't expect you to know it. I was
Paul
just
Macbeth,
name dropping for the 1.5 people who have ever heard of him that might listen to this podcast.
I already forgot his name.
Did you just say Paul Macbeth? Yo, that's my boy. Oh my god, me and that guy would go way back.
I was questioning whether I should like act like I knew who that was or not.
Oh yeah.
I barely know who it is. I'm even like somewhat into that. All right, yeah. So upcoming episodes, Scream. That's going to be David's first pick,
and our first face cam thing.
Maybe if we pull. If we get our shit together with it, then we can make that our first. Visual one.
David's debut, our face's debut. Go ahead.
Our face's debut, yeah. After that, we're going to do Casino Royale in preparation for No Time to Die.
Mm-hmm.
Check out our YouTube channel. You can leave constructive criticism on all of our old podcasts and video essays. You can buy our merchandise on Zazzle. Our logo's by Kelsey Hendry. Follow the show on Twitter at INTAnalysis18. You can follow me on Twitter at Davos Watson.
Find me at based_Phoenix on Twitter, based Phoenix, one word, on Instagram, based Phoenix on YouTube, and JBased Phoenix on Twitch.
All right. So, Nick, thank you for coming on the show.
Big shout outs to Nick. Thanks, man.
Yep.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
And thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.